The first thing she said to me was, "Your cucumbers are too small." No build-up, no context, just straight to the point. Honestly, I'd have preferred a slap in the face. At least that would have made more sense. But no, that's where it all began. And trust me, what came after was even worse. But before I get into that, let me start with an introduction. My name's Thomas. I'm 42 years old. No kids. One wife, or at least for now. Let's just say things aren't looking too promising on that front. For the last 20 years, I've poured everything I have into building my business from scratch. I went from living on instant noodles to treating myself to steak dinners in places where the bill could make most people's eyes water. My pride and joy? A software startup. I won't bore you with all the technical jargon, but let's just say I made something people couldn't live without, and they were willing to pay more than they'd pay their therapists just to use it. Of course, all that success didn't come without sacrifice. It cost me time, sleep, most of my hair, and pretty much everything except my sanity. But hey, that's the price of ambition, right? For the longest time, though, I believed my marriage was one thing I could rely on. It felt like the one stable part of my life, as solid as the granite countertops in our dream home. The key word here is believed. I met Samantha when we were young and still naive, back when love felt like enough and money wasn't even on the radar. She was stunning back then, and she knew it. Everyone did. Tall, blonde, with legs that could make a man forget how to speak. I wasn't exactly a catch myself, but I had ambition. I had drive. Back then, that seemed to be enough. We hit it off, fell in love, got married, and played house the way we were supposed to. But let's be real, people either change or they show you more of who they really are. Samantha used to seem different, or maybe I just fell for the version of her I wanted to see. Either way, I loved her fiercely. I loved the way she looked at me like I was everything. I loved how she'd twirl her hair when I talked about my dreams. But somewhere along the line, that look she used to give me disappeared. I knew it deep down, but I chose to ignore it. It was easier that way. Things started to shift when my company began raking in more money than I ever dreamed of. That's when Samantha decided she didn't need to work anymore. At first, I was on board with it. I was making more than enough for the both of us, and I wanted her to have the freedom to figure out what made her happy. But what did she choose? Herself. Only herself. She became, there's no nicer way to say it, high maintenance. Days spent at the salon, spa treatments that sounded like science experiments, and shopping trips that could have stocked an entire boutique. She left her job the moment my paychecks started growing, declaring that her career was staying beautiful. "Keeping myself curvy is a full-time job, Thomas," she'd say, with this look like I was an idiot for not understanding how exhausting it was to do nothing but look good. And I'll admit, for a while I went along with it. I told myself that's just part of the deal when you're married to a beautiful woman. Like owning a luxury car, you can't put cheap gas in it. But over time, I realized something. I wasn't married to a partner. I was living with a pet. A pet that came with a steep price tag but no joy to show for it. Unlike a pet, though, Samantha didn't bring happiness. Just a growing pile of bills and a matching attitude. To be fair, she wasn't cruel or nasty, not outright. She was indifferent, and somehow that hurt worse. I became nothing more than a human ATM, there for her to swipe whenever she wanted. You know how people say, "I never saw it coming"? Well, I guess that's half true for me. Looking back, the signs were there all along. I just didn't want to see them. And then came the conversation. The one about my cucumber. I remember every detail like it happened yesterday. It was a Thursday night, and I had just gotten back from a week-long business trip. I was drained but glad to be home. All I wanted was to relax with a beer and spend a quiet evening with my wife. She was in the living room, looking like she'd walked straight out of a fashion shoot. She had on a silky robe that probably cost more than the car I drove in college. For a moment, I thought maybe this would be one of those rare nights when we'd reconnect, when I'd feel like a husband instead of a walking ATM. But then she hit me with it. "We need to talk," she said, her tone calm and detached. You know, nothing good ever starts with those words. My stomach sank, but I tried to play it cool, making a joke. "Sure, as long as it's not about redecorating the bathroom again." She didn't laugh. Instead, her eyes, sharp and cold, cut right through me. No, seriously, she insisted. Those eyes used to make me feel unstoppable, like I could conquer the world. Now they made me feel like a kid being scolded. I've been thinking about something, she began, and I want to be honest with you. I braced myself. Maybe she'd maxed out the credit card again on some designer handbag or planned another getaway with her friends. You know, the usual. But no, this was something else. I think you should consider, enhancing your cucumber. Felt like the ground had just vanished beneath me. I froze, staring at her, trying to make sense of what I just heard. At first, I thought it had to be a joke, but the look on her face said otherwise. I've done some research, she went on, like she was discussing the weather. There are places that can help with that. I managed to croak out, help me with what? We've been married for 15 years, Samantha. This was never an issue. She shrugged, so nonchalantly it made my blood boil. I just think it could make things better for both of us. Better for both of us? Like I was the problem here? The woman I'd supported all these years, who'd lived a life of luxury because of my hard work, was now telling me I needed to change something so personal. Why? What had made her even think this was necessary? Was she comparing me to someone else? I told her I'd think about it, but my mind was already racing. I felt this surge of anger, like an explosion ready to go off, but I buried it. That's what men do, right? Stay calm. Keep it logical, don't make a scene. Still, I knew right then and there that everything had changed. Or maybe, deep down, this was something that had always been there, hiding in plain sight. Samantha had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let it slide. I needed to find out what was really going on here, no matter how deep it went. But I promised myself one thing. When I did, there was going to be hell to pay. You're probably thinking that, after a conversation like that, I must have completely lost it. Maybe started acting like some obsessive boyfriend, snooping through her phone, following her around, digging through her things like some paranoid wreck. But that's not me. It's never been me, and it never will be. Here's how I see it. If you reach a point where you feel the need to spy on your partner, the relationship's already over. So no, I didn't spend sleepless nights analyzing her every move or trying to piece together what she meant by those words. I'm not an insecure guy. I've built a company from nothing. I know how to compartmentalize. When problems come up, you tackle them, shove them into a corner, and move forward. I had way too much on my plate to sit around wondering if my wife was out there comparing me to someone else. But I wasn't clueless either. That night, as I lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling while she slept soundly, completely unbothered in her perfect little world, I made a decision. If she thought there was something wrong with me, something I needed to fix, then I had to find out what else might be going on. The only way to do that without raising suspicion was to act like everything was perfectly normal. So, the next day I made one phone call. Just one. I called my old buddy Jameson. We went back to college days, and if there was anyone I could count on, it was him. Jameson had this way of seeing the world differently, a skill that had naturally led him to start his own detective agency. Shadow Works Investigations. The name might sound a little over the top, but Jameson? He was the real deal, sharp, resourceful, and damn good at what he did. Jameson, I need a favor, I said, getting straight to the point. That was all it took. We caught up for a few minutes, but he already knew where this was going. Thomas, he said, his voice tinged with surprise. Are you asking me to follow your wife? Yeah, I admitted, my stomach twisting into knots. I need to know where she's going, who she's seeing. All of it. Once I gave Jameson the green light, things started moving fast. He had two of his best guys tailing Samantha within hours. These guys were pros, so good they could probably tell you what she had for breakfast without her even noticing. Meanwhile, I threw myself back into my daily grind. Business deals, late nights at the office, the usual routine that kept me too busy to dwell on what Jameson's team might uncover. I told myself I wasn't obsessing. I didn't want to think about it. Denial? It's a powerful thing, and distraction is its best friend. And when the distractions weren't enough, I'd pour myself a drink. A couple of whiskeys here and there turned into 3 or 4 some nights. Nothing too crazy, just enough to take the edge off, or at least that's what I told myself as I reached for another glass. Jameson kept me in the loop with regular updates, and for weeks it was the same story. Nothing yet, Thomas. She went to the salon, did some shopping, had lunch with her friends. No red flags. If she's up to something, she's damn good at hiding it. For a while I started to believe him. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe her comment about my cucumber was just a clumsy attempt to spark some sort of connection. It didn't make sense, but then again, what in our marriage did these days? I even considered calling Jameson off, figuring I'd save myself the money and the stress and chalk it all up to a weird, misguided moment between us. Then came the call. The one that flipped my world upside down. It was a Wednesday, an ordinary day. I was in the middle of pitching a $500,000 deal to a client, and my phone buzzed. Normally, I would have ignored it, but when I saw Jameson's name on the screen, something told me to pick up. "We need to talk," Jameson said. His voice was unusually tense, which wasn't like him. Jameson was the definition of calm under pressure, so this wasn't a good sign. "I'm kind of in the middle of something," I replied, glancing at the client who was still droning on about budget projections. "What's going on?" "She's not exactly where she said she'd be today," Jameson said carefully. My heart started to race. "She told me she was meeting Maya for lunch," I said, my voice tight. "Well, she wasn't with Maya," Jameson said, his tone deliberate. "She met up with a guy instead. And Thomas, it didn't look like a business meeting." His words hit me like a sledgehammer. My pulse thundered in my ears as I gripped the phone tighter. "Are you sure?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. "Yeah, Thomas, I'm sure. They were at a hotel." That one word, hotel, was like a bullet to the chest. The room around me blurred, and my blood felt like it was boiling. "Are you absolutely sure?" I asked again, my voice barely a whisper. "Yeah," Jameson said quietly. "I'm sure. Got pictures. Got video. Proof." Those were Jameson's exact words. Proof that my wife, the woman I'd spent 15 years with, wasn't just with another man, but doing things I could barely bring myself to imagine. And while she was doing that, I'd been sitting in a meeting, completely oblivious, pitching deals to strangers who had no idea my entire world was crumbling. What happened next is a blur. I think I wrapped up the meeting, or at least found some excuse to leave. I told Jameson to send me everything. The pictures, the videos, the whole ugly truth. Then I went to my office, shut the door, and sat there staring at my trembling hands. I couldn't stop shaking, my body humming with an anger I'd never felt before. The silence was the worst part. Just me, sitting there alone, choking on the realization that this wasn't some misunderstanding or offhand comment. This was betrayal. A knife in the back, twisted for good measure. And it had been happening right under my nose while I played the clueless, loyal husband. But I wasn't clueless anymore. I knew exactly what was going on, and exactly what I had to do. This wasn't going to end well. Not for Samantha. Not for her boy toy. Because if there's one thing you need to know about me, it's that I don't let things slide. Never have, never will. And when it comes to revenge, let's just say I'd started planning my moves before Jameson even hung up the phone. That day, something inside me broke. Every man reaches a point where he has to choose. Fight or fold. And folding was never my style. There was no way I was going to let Samantha walk all over me, then ride off into the sunset with her gym rat boyfriend. No, I was taking my life back, and I was going to make damn sure she paid for every single lie, every betrayal, and every time she smiled at me while stabbing me in the back. The next morning, I called my lawyers. They've worked with me for years and know exactly how I operate. Prepare everything, I told them. When this divorce happens, Samantha walks away with nothing. And I mean nothing. They didn't need much convincing. If anything, they seemed eager to get started. My legal team is ruthless. Once they go in for the kill, they don't stop until there's nothing left. We were already moving. Financial assets, properties, bank accounts. Every piece of comfort Samantha had grown used to was now in play. By the time we were done, she'd have nothing but the clothes on her back. And honestly, that would be the best-case scenario for her. While my lawyers were tearing apart the financials, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The other guy, the one who was sneaking around with my wife. Jameson had gotten all the details. His name was Dylan. Tall, dark, handsome, the whole cliché. Muscles, tattoos, and that cocky smile that probably worked like a charm on bored housewives. And, of course, he was a fitness trainer. Because of course he was. But the kicker? Dylan wasn't just some random fling. He was married. With a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. First, I couldn't believe it. This guy wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was doing it while parading around as a devoted family man. It made me sick. Not just because of what he was doing to his own family, but because he was a reflection of everything I hated in that moment. The same betrayal. The same lies. Just in a different package. I could have let it go. But I didn't. I could have focused all my energy on Samantha and let Dylan deal with the mess he'd made of his own life. But that's not how I operate. You don't mess with what's mine and walk away without consequences. So, I called Jameson again and told him to set up a little meeting with Dylan. Nothing over the top, no one needed to end up in the ER. But I wanted Dylan to understand exactly who he was dealing with. Jameson's team watched him, tracked his routine, and picked the perfect moment. Late one night, after Dylan had finished a training session and was heading to his car, they made their move. It was dark, quiet, and empty. Ideal for them to stay hidden until the moment they needed to show themselves. When they cornered Dylan, he didn't know what hit him. At first, he probably thought it was just a random mugging or a couple of troublemakers out for kicks. But then they shoved a phone in his face and asked, "Do you know the woman you've been messing with has a husband?" The look on his face was priceless. Confusion, panic, fear. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, his voice shaking as he started to piece it together. The confidence, the cocky grin he was known for, gone. Fear smells sweet on guys like Dylan, the ones who think they're untouchable. "Samantha," one of my guys said. "Ring a bell? Married to Thomas? You've been keeping busy with her, haven't you?" Dylan's face went even whiter. He tripped over his words, trying to explain, but everything he said was garbage. "I didn't know. It was a mistake." Just pathetic excuses that no one believed. Then came the consequences. I told my guys to keep it measured, no permanent damage, but to leave an impression. Dylan needed a reminder of what happens when you mess with another man's wife. When they were done, let's just say Dylan wouldn't forget the name Thomas anytime soon. Every glance in the mirror, every ache, would bring it all back to him. But I wasn't finished. Dylan had a family, a wife, a daughter, and that meant his actions didn't just affect him. They rippled out, hurting everyone around him. My team paid a visit to his picture-perfect suburban home a couple of days later. His wife answered the door, holding their little girl in her arms, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. Jameson's guys didn't need to say much. They handed her an envelope, thick with photos and videos, proof of Dylan's extracurricular activities with my wife. They didn't stick around to watch her reaction, but when they told me how her hands trembled as she opened the envelope and her eyes filled with tears, I felt something. Not regret exactly, but something close. She didn't deserve this. Neither did their daughter. But she deserved the truth. She needed to know what kind of man she was married to. A liar, a cheater, someone who destroyed 2 families because he couldn't keep his promises or his pants on. And then there was Samantha. She wasn't walking away from this unscathed. Dylan wasn't getting away with it, but neither was she. My revenge wasn't just about Dylan. It was about ripping apart the web of lies Samantha had woven around herself. Brick by brick, her carefully crafted world was coming down, and I was going to make sure she felt every single impact. The real game began when my lawyers gave me the green light. This wasn't going to be a clean break. I wasn't interested in just signing papers and moving on. I wanted her world to implode so completely that she'd have no choice but to face the disaster she created. The first step? Cutting off her lifeline, the money. Every credit card, every joint account, every penny she'd been using to fund her lavish lifestyle. I shut it all down. For years, she'd spent my hard-earned money as if it were her birthright. Not anymore. She'd built her castle out of my work, my sacrifices, my dedication, and now I was tearing it all down. And believe me, I wasn't stopping there. Samantha had no idea what was coming. I was just getting started that I called the bank and froze every account in Samantha's name, cutting her off from any access to money. I wish I could have seen her face when she found out. I imagined her at one of her favorite high-end boutiques, arms loaded with overpriced outfits she didn't need, heading to the register with that smug confidence she always carried. She'd swipe her card, expecting it to sail through as usual, only to see declined flash on the screen. Can you picture it? The confusion, the disbelief, the awkward smile she'd give the cashier, insisting there must be some mistake. Swipe again. Declined. Try another card. Declined. And then it would hit her, her free spending days were over. Honestly, I'd have paid good money just to witness that moment. But freezing her accounts was only the beginning. I made sure she couldn't reach me at all. I blocked her number, her emails, everything. No matter how hard she tried to contact me, she wouldn't get through. I knew she would try, of course. Samantha had a way of charming her way out of any mess when it suited her. But not this time. I wasn't leaving any doors open for her to weasel her way back into my life. And I didn't stop there. I hired security to guard the house. Our house. The one she loved showing off as her forever home. I brought in 2 of the toughest, no-nonsense guys I could find and stationed them outside 24/7. If Samantha dared to show up, they had strict orders. She wasn't to come anywhere near the front door. They were to collect her things, already packed into black trash bags, and send her on her way. That house was no longer hers, and I made sure she knew it. At work, I shut her out completely too. I went to my office manager and made it crystal clear. Samantha was never to step foot inside the building again. No messages, no calls, no surprise visits. As far as my office was concerned, she didn't exist. I wasn't giving her a single opportunity to put on her heartbroken wife act, trying to play the victim or guilt me into anything. That chapter was closed, and I wasn't letting her rewrite it. But cutting her off financially and blocking her from my life? That was just the warm-up. What I really wanted was for everyone to see Samantha for who she truly was. I wanted her reputation obliterated, her perfect facade shattered. That's where Jameson came in again. Jameson had a contact, let's call him a tech expert. This guy wasn't your average basement hacker. He was a professional, the type who could make anything appear or vanish with a few keystrokes. I gave him one simple task: break into all of Samantha's social media accounts. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, the whole lot. Once he was in, we got to work. The first posts were photos. Every damning picture Jameson's team had captured of Samantha and Dylan in their hotel rendezvous. Date nights, intimate embraces. Every sleazy moment we had on file went live on her accounts. Every post was carefully tagged, leaving no room for doubt about what she'd been up to. But I didn't stop at just the photos. I had my tech guy write captions too, ones that made it look like she was soliciting herself. Things like providing premium services, DM for rates. The implication was clear, and once those posts hit the internet, they spread like wildfire. Friends, family, acquaintances, even strangers who followed her for her curated, perfect life, all saw the truth. The facade she'd worked so hard to build crumbled in an instant. Comments flooded in, from shock to ridicule, her social circle turning on her as fast as the posts spread. Samantha's perfect world wasn't just collapsing. It was being burned to the ground, and I wasn't even close to finished. This was just the beginning. Her phone must have been blowing up. Friends demanding explanations, her parents probably in shock, and her so-called friends turning on her faster than a snap. The best part? She couldn't deny a single thing. These posts weren't anonymous. They came directly from her own accounts. Her fingerprints were all over them, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do to stop it. I imagined her panic, her perfect little world crumbling in real time. Years spent curating this flawless image of herself, all gone in an instant. Sure, there was a fleeting moment where I felt a little bad, like maybe I'd gone too far. But that moment passed. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure she couldn't pull this on anyone else. She'd built her life on lies, and now everyone could see her for who she really was. But this was just the opening act. The blocked accounts, the public humiliation, the security guards, They were all just the prelude to the main event. The real spectacle was yet to come, the trial. Samantha thought she could live her fantasy life, breaking vows and pretending there wouldn't be consequences. But she forgot one thing: I don't lose. Not in business, not in life, and definitely not to someone who tried to ruin me. The court date came faster than expected, and when it did, it was over in no time. Like ripping off a Band-Aid, except this Band-Aid had been festering for years. Samantha probably thought she had a shot, maybe even convinced herself the judge would show her some sympathy or that she could charm her way into a decent settlement. But the evidence, the testimonies, the airtight case my lawyers presented, she never stood a chance. Her lawyer might as well have surrendered before it even started. Honestly, I didn't bother attending every hearing. Seeing her would have only made me angrier, and I didn't need that. The law was on my side, and my legal team dismantled her piece by piece. Each session brought her closer to walking out of that courtroom with nothing but the clothes on her back. But there was one day, one moment, when she managed to catch me alone. It was after a hearing, and I was heading out, finally feeling like I could breathe. That's when she pounced, like a spider lying in wait. As soon as she spotted me, she lunged. "Just hear me out, Thomas," she begged, her voice shaky as she grabbed my arm. Her face was flushed, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I'm sorry. I made a mistake." "A mistake," I said, yanking my arm free. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. "You call months of sneaking around with another man a mistake?" Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. Her voice got louder, her desperation clear. "I didn't know what I was doing. I was confused. I was lonely. Confused," I snapped, cutting her off. "You were sleeping with a married guy, Samantha, and you had the audacity to tell me I needed to fix myself? No, that's not confusion. That's calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing." Her composure completely broke then. She fell to her knees, mascara streaked across her face, sobbing right there in the courthouse hallway. She didn't care who was watching, didn't care how pathetic she looked. All she wanted was one more chance to claw her way back into my life. But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. Samantha's tears might have worked on me once, but those days were long gone. It looked like something straight out of a bad soap opera. "Please, Thomas," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't do this. I can't live without you. I'll do anything. I swear I'll make it right." I didn't even blink. The woman I thought I'd married was long gone, if she'd ever truly existed. The person kneeling before me wasn't my wife. She was a stranger, someone who meant absolutely nothing to me. This wasn't about love or regret. Her apology wasn't heartfelt. It was about desperation, fear of losing everything. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. I leaned in close, my voice low so only she could hear. "You're nothing to me. Nothing. Yesterday, I had a great time with a couple of girls. And you know what? Not one of them cared about the size of my cucumber. They loved it. The transformation was immediate. Her pleading morphed into fury, her desperation twisting into venom. She scrambled to her feet, trembling, her face a mask of rage. The realization hit her like a slap. She wasn't going to get a thing from me. She was leaving with nothing. "You're a bastard, Thomas," she screamed, her voice echoing off the courthouse walls. "A cold-hearted, selfish asshole." I didn't flinch. I didn't look back as she hurled every insult she could muster, trying to provoke me. Maybe she just wanted a reaction, any reaction, to feel like she still had some shred of power over me. But I was done. Done with the lies, the manipulation, the crocodile tears. At the door, I turned around one last time, met her furious gaze, and raised my middle finger, high and proud. Then I walked out, leaving her behind in the mess she'd made, as empty as she deserved to feel. The door slammed shut behind me, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The trial was over, but my life was just beginning. Once Samantha was officially out of the picture, I did what any man would do after escaping a toxic marriage. I started living. No more dead weight. No more pretending everything was fine. The first thing I did was take a step back from work. Why bury myself in spreadsheets when I could finally enjoy the life I'd worked so hard to build? I promoted my best people to handle the day-to-day and let the company practically run itself. It was still my baby, but for the first time, I trusted others to take the wheel while I explored the open road. I packed my bags and hit my bucket list. Beaches in the Caribbean, vineyards in Tuscany, the neon glow of Tokyo, and sunrises over the ocean in Bali. Each new destination was a step further from the nightmare Samantha had dragged me into. It wasn't about filling a void anymore. It was about rediscovering joy, dancing, laughing, and waking up every day feeling alive. While my life soared, Samantha's world crumbled. News of her scandal spread like wildfire. The queen of the social scene, now a pariah. Her so-called friends either cut ties out of disgust or because they realized she wasn't worth the trouble. Her rich girl habits didn't disappear, but her cash flow did, leaving her scrambling to hold on to the illusion of her former life. I heard through the grapevine she tried to cozy up to a wealthy businessman I knew. He was a sharp guy, a real estate mogul who wasn't easily fooled. When she turned on the charm, batting her eyelashes and playing her old games, he shut her down instantly. "Get lost," he told her. "You're bad news, and I don't need your trouble." Brutal but fair. No one wanted anything to do with someone whose life had become a walking scandal. Dylan, her gym rat lover, didn't fare much better. His wife wasted no time filing for divorce once my team handed her the evidence. Dylan probably thought she'd cry and beg for him to stay. Instead, she packed his bags and kicked him to the curb. But I wasn't done with Dylan yet. His reputation was everything in his line of work, and I made a few calls. I spoke to the gym owner and some of his major clients, telling them exactly the kind of man he was, how he preyed on married women and destroyed his own family. By the end of the week, Dylan was out of a job, out of a marriage, and probably out of hope. Some might say I went too far. Maybe you're thinking, why not let karma handle it, Thomas? Why all the trouble? Sure, maybe a better man would have walked away. But I'm not a saint. They played dirty, and I made sure they saw how deep the dirt could go. Now, here I am, sitting on a beach with a cold drink in my hand, watching the waves crash on the shore. For the first time in years, my life is mine. No more lies, no more burdens. Just me, my freedom, and a world waiting to be explored. In a strange way, I have Samantha to thank for this new beginning. If she hadn't blown everything up, I'd still be stuck in that miserable marriage, pretending everything was okay. So what would you have done in my shoes? Let them get away with it? Or made sure they paid the price like I did? Thanks for listening. Here's to new beginnings, living without regrets, and making sure you always come out on top. Cheers. Stay strong.